Hello everyone, welcome to the Green Man channel. Hope you're all good and well. So time for a Saturday premiere, and for this Saturday I'm counting down my top 10 doom metal albums of all time. So I have been doing this a bit on the channel where I've been doing top 10 countdown lists of other metal subgenres. I did it for new metal way back earlier in the year. I also more recently did a top 10 melodic death metal albums alongside JC Rock and Metal reviews and the Chill Dude on the Couch reviews as well. And yeah, doom metal is pretty broad, really. I mean, you have so many different types. I mean, with a lot of metal subgenres, it breaks down into more subgenres and then more subgenres, certainly as time has gone on. And with doom, you have like gothic doom, stoner doom, epic doom, death doom, melodic doom, and just sludgy doom. You have so many different kinds of doom metal. So I tried to select a list here which wasn't just kind of one type of doom too much, although I do have naturally taste for the more melodic side of doom metal rather than, I guess, the sort of super slow stuff. I do like a little bit of melody in my doom generally, and of course this is my list, this is personal, your list will be different. And you know what, I realised there are so many doom metal bands actually that remain for me pretty undiscovered. I haven't explored fully their discographies, so there are going to be some albums that you'll think, why hasn't he included this album or that album? And it's just because probably I haven't come across those albums yet. So this is just my personal list. These are the ones that I know and love. So let's start this list with number 10, which is an album called Veronica Decides to Die from the band Saturnus, Danish band. This album came out back in 2006. It was the third full-length studio album from the band, and this is a fantastic album. It has a lot of big crushing riffs, but with some really good slow building melodies, great harsh vocals, and just, you know, one of those albums that I think you maybe need a little bit of time with, just to, as with quite a few of these sort of slower doom metal albums, but it's just really crushing. Great melodic passages, as I say. Some of my favourite tracks include I Long, Rain Wash Me, and To the Dreams. So yeah, that's my first pick at number 10, Saturnus, Veronica Decides to Die. Moving on to number 9, I've gone with one of the big four doom metal bands, or as they were called, and this is Pentagram. And this is the album Day of Reckoning, which was the second studio album from the band back in 1987. And so if your tastes lean more into the stoner territory of doom metal, this is an essential album for you. I think this is really, really good stuff. Actually, I'll hold my hand up and confess, this is the only album I know from this band. I have never explored their other albums, which is probably criminal as someone with a taste for doom metal or stoner doom metal. But yeah, this is a really good album. You know, it's got some really good riffing. It's a little bit more of an up-tempo style album. So if you don't like the super slow funeral kind of doom stuff or melodic doom, you know, the really slow stuff, you'll probably enjoy this album because it's a bit more like that kind of Black Sabbath early 70s era, and has some great psychedelic stuff I think here and there as well. Really cool stuff. Love the drumming. Favourite tracks on here, the title track, Broken Vows, and Burning Saviour. Now, my number 8 is a pick which I think is probably the album that maybe a lot of people don't know this one from the doom metal spectrum. It's called The 11th Hour. Rather, the band is The 11th Hour. The band is called, the album is called Lacrima Mortis. This was the second studio album, and I don't think they've gone on to do any more albums since this one. This was released in 2012, and this is a Dutch melodic doom metal band. And this is a super dark album. I mean, I know doom is by pretty much its nature dark in its sound, but this is really dark stuff with, you know, sort of slightly disorientating sounds. And, you know, it comes with some pretty good vocals and occasional melody, lots of big crushing, sometimes repetitive riffs, but I think the repetitive riffs only serve to strengthen this particular album's approach. And yeah, it's just a really great album. I think this one, an unusual one, out on this list, perhaps slightly less common. As I say, some of my favourite tracks are The Death of Life, Tears of the Bereaved, and Reunion Illusion from this band. Next up, number 7, we go to, and I think this band may just be a favourite funeral doom metal band for me at number 7. This is Shape of Despair and Monotony Fields from 2015. Now, this album, it kind of has one mood for most of the way, pretty much all the way through the album. As with a lot of funeral doom, it is kind of one tempo a lot of the time, and it never really moves too far out of that. But Shape of Despair's formula, their sound, is so stunningly beautiful that this album becomes hypnotic. The way it layers the music, the way it brings in the beautiful female vocals of Natalie Koskinen, and just gets more and more epic. Some of the tracks on here just get increasingly fantastic and big, and as I say, just beautiful. Enchanting even perhaps would be an appropriate word or adjective for this album, I think. You have stuff like Reaching the Innermost, the opening track is great. Perhaps my favourite cut on this one is Descending in a Night. And if you've not heard that song, you like funeral doom, and particularly maybe if you like the kind of atmospheric funeral doom of this style, you're going to love this track. I mean, if you only listen to one song, I'd probably recommend Descending in a Night. It is just off the charts, amazing. Written in My Scars, the last track, is the other one I really love on this album. So check out Shape of Despair, Monotony Fields, if you like super atmospheric but beautiful funeral doom metal. Next up at number 6, we are starting to get down to the real deal albums now. And I go way back, and I could not pick this album. And it is regarded by a lot of, I think, music journalists and perhaps musicians as well as kind of the forefather album of the whole doom metal spectrum, and that being Black Sabbath's Master of Reality. That's my number 6, Master of Reality by Black Sabbath. Classic Black Sabbath album. Incidentally, even though it's high up on this top 10 list, it's not my favourite Black Sabbath album, but it's the one that I feel is credited with being one of the first of the sort of stoner doom style. So therefore I felt like it was perhaps an important choice for this list. One which I also like a lot, otherwise it wouldn't make the list. So you've got stuff on here like my favourite tracks, After Forever, Children of the Grave, and Solitude, a slower, more mellow pick from this album that I just think is a kind of understated, very nice track on this album. So that's number 6, Black Sabbath, Master of Reality, their 3rd studio album. And I won't reveal my favourite Sabbath album yet, because I was thinking at some point, they're 19 albums. I don't actually know all 19 albums yet. There are a couple I've never listened to, but I know most of them. But I will choose a favourite Sabbath album and reveal that to you in due course. But look out for that video. That's probably a while away at this point anyway. Number 5 is Draconian, Arcane Rain Fell. Draconian, one of my favourite kind of melodic gothic style doom metal bands. I love both their singers, whether it was Lisa or Heike. I believe Lisa has now returned to the singing duties for this band. Heike has left, as I understand it. And this is just another one of those astoundingly beautiful albums with superb vocal moments, crushingly heavy. Again, this is, I guess, an album which actually I think there is a little bit of a mix of tempos occasionally on this album to make things interesting, in the likes of Heaven Laden Tears. And this is actually a concept album about the fall of Lucifer from heaven as well, if that's of interest. And I certainly think it tells that story very well. But this album, for me, the reason it's number 5 is probably because of the 15-minute long album closer, Death Come Near Me, which is possibly a favourite doom metal track of all time for me. It is just sensational. And yeah, I mean, just one of those tracks you just have to shut yourself off from the rest of the world, put on your headphones, just for 15 minutes, just sit or lie in bed and appreciate just the absolutely stunning delivery of this song. It is just something special. So that's my number 5 choice. I also like, actually, I mentioned Heaven Laid in Tears earlier, Death Come Near Me. Also, Daylight Misery I really enjoy on this album. So, Draconian Arcane Rainfall from 2005. Just a high quality bit of melodic doom metal for you. Number 4. I've gone for another one of the big four doom bands from the 80s, I think. I have chosen Candlemass's Nightfall, the second studio album from legendary band Candlemass. Almost went with the debut, but then I think I just slightly prefer at the moment. It's a difficult one. I have tried to pick different albums and not more than one album from the same artist. I've gone with Nightfall. Just Messiah's vocals on this album just sound incredible. I love all these different vocal phrases and melodies. They are just awesome. And then the heavy riffing's great. The production on this album, for its time, I think is just top-notch production. And the cover art fits the music. My favourite tracks on Candlemass's Nightfall will be Samaritan, Dark Are the Veils of Death, and Mournful Lament, or Mourner's Lament, rather. That brings us on to number 3. We're getting down to my true favourites now. We've got Draconian Times from Paradise Lost, which could be argued as more of a gothic metal album, I guess. Maybe this is controversial for me to include it on this list, but I couldn't not include a Paradise Lost album. And I just felt the need to include Draconian Times, because I still think it's very doomy, it's very gloomy in its nature. I love Nick Holmes' vocals on this album, and my favourite tracks on here are Hallowed Land, Shadow Kings, and again, another all-time favourite doom metal track for me is Elusive Cure. Nick just sounds out of this world on that track. Going over the top. I'm getting into passionate mode. Green Man is going into passionate Green Man mode here. Right, number 2 is the band on my t-shirt. And I very nearly went with Songs from the North because I adore that album. But because of the third disc of that album, I'm not quite as big on the third disc. I love the first 2 discs immensely, and that almost made me pick that album instead of this one. But I've gone with their 5th studio album, The Emerald Forest and the Blackbird from 2012, which is a shorter album. It does not overstay its welcome one bit. It is a little bit of death doom here and there in this album, with some great range of tempos, beautiful moments throughout, and some of my favourite cuts on this particular album are Cathedral Walls, the wonderful Labyrinth of London, and the tribute song to Peter Stills, April the 14th, which is just a mesmerising song with one of the best doom metal choruses I've heard in my whole life. And Emerald Forest and the Blackbird I think is a bit underrated, actually, from the Swallow the Sun catalogue. It's just a really fantastic doom metal album. Check that out. Again, can't recommend it highly enough. Which leaves just my number 1 album, which was incidentally my number 1 album of the 2010s. I'm trying to remember now if it was my number 1 album of the 2010s on the video I did a couple of years ago, but I did a Facebook list a long time ago, or not, well, several years back, or maybe it was 3 years ago, because that was 2020. I'm just getting lost now. Anyway, yes, Paul Bearer, Foundations of Burden, is my number 1 doom metal album of all time. Their second studio album from 2014. There is not a single song on this album I dislike. I love the long cuts. I love the shortcut Ashes on here, which I think is just absolutely beautiful. An adjective I've used a lot in this video is beautiful, but this is no exception. This album is stunning, I think, in its construction, its approach to song development, slow but steady, and every layer has meaning behind it in the songs. It hits hard. The soloing is gorgeous. The lead guitar work and the slow, heavy chords just work wonders with just this sort of magical sound that this album has and delivers on. My favourite tracks on my favourite doom metal album of all time, Foundations of Burden, would be Worlds Apart, Foundations, and The Ghost I Used to Be. So that's it. You've got my top 10 doom metal albums of all time. Feel free to drop yours in the comments. Do let me know. Don't forget to drop a sub to the channel if you enjoy this kind of content. Otherwise, from me, take care everybody till the next time. Bye for now.